Every story has a turning point, and for Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't a throw, a touchdown, or even a win. It was a meme. Yep, a meme. The infamous viral moment came when one of his loudest critics, the guy who had been barking for months that Shedeur was nothing more than a social media quarterback, tripped live on air. A literal stumble. The kind of awkward, slow-motion tumble that the internet never lets you live down. The memes spread like wildfire. Edits with sad violins, TikTok remixes with clown horns, Twitter threads with captions like, "This is every Shedeur take rolled into one clip." At first, it was comedy, but soon, that blooper became a metaphor. It symbolized the collapse of his entire anti-Shedeur campaign. Because while he was tumbling in front of millions, Shedeur was quietly proving him wrong with every snap. The symbol behind the stumble. The internet roast was funny, sure, but it wasn't just Schadenfreude. People began connecting the dots. This must be what it feels like to watch his credibility fall apart, fans commented. And in a way, they were right. Because that stumble wasn't just an accident. It was symbolic of all the off-balance, shaky, and lazy narratives that had been tossed at Shedeur for years. The too flashy tags, the endless nitpicking of his jewelry and Instagram posts, the dismissal of his actual tape, which showed a quarterback with poise, accuracy, and leadership that screamed NFL ready. Everything his critics said was slipping, and they didn't even realize it yet, until the ground hit. Momentum shifts. That stumble gave Shedeur's supporters something they didn't even need, but loved anyway: leverage. While critics scrambled to spin new takes, fans could now point at the receipts, then laugh back. "Remember when?" became the rally cry. The internet never forgets, especially when the same person who clowned Shedeur is suddenly forced to backtrack on national television. From that moment forward, the narrative began to shift. Not all at once, but drip by drip. Each highlight reel, each accurate spiral, each stat line that no one could deny. The fall became less about Shedeur's critics clowning him, and more about those critics clowning themselves. Meme to message. What started as a 10-second blooper turned into a pivot point. A tripping critic became the face of Shedeur's doubters, and that clip embodied how flimsy their arguments had always been. And while they scrambled to recover their analysis, Shedeur didn't need to say a word. His momentum was already carrying him forward, one throw at a time. Because sometimes the game isn't just one on the field. Sometimes it's one on the timeline. And on that timeline, Shedeur was undefeated. Before the flip-flop, before the backpedals, before the same critics pretended they were first in line on the Shedeur bandwagon. The narrative was simple. Paint him as everything but a quarterback. Media voices, draft experts, and self-appointed gatekeepers all read from the same tired script. Too flashy, too worried about Instagram, too much like his dad. That was the playbook. Create an image of Shedeur as a brand first, athlete second, and watch the public buy it. Swagger as a scarlet letter. His confidence labeled as cockiness. His NIL deals attacked as distractions. His jewelry and luxury cars somehow proof he wasn't focused on football. It was as if they decided success off the field automatically canceled out skill on the field. Never mind that Shedeur was putting up numbers many established quarterbacks would kill for. Critics obsessed over his watches while he was dropping frozen ropes behind a crumbling O-line at Colorado. They broke down his TikToks like they were scouting film, ignoring the actual film, which told an entirely different story. Calm pocket presence, pinpoint accuracy, high football IQ. But that's how narratives work. Once the label sticks, everything becomes evidence of a foregone conclusion. And for Shedeur, the conclusion was not NFL material, ignoring the receipts. Here's the part that really exposes the bias. The receipts didn't lie. 40 touchdowns in a season, consistency against ranked defenses, leadership that kept his team competitive even when everything else around him was collapsing. And yet, those numbers weren't proof of talent for the talking heads. Instead, they brushed them aside, spun them as stat padding, or simply ignored them as noise. Some even argued that his success was only because of soft schedules or media hype. As if 300-yard games and 4 touchdowns a week just fall out of the sky because someone has a famous father. It wasn't logic. It was narrative preservation. The disconnect. This gap between what Shedeur was actually doing on the field and how he was being described off it created the perfect storm. Fans watching him play saw one thing: a composed, NFL-ready quarterback making pro throws under duress. Meanwhile, pundits crafted another picture: a shiny object, a distraction, a coach's kid who wouldn't last. It didn't matter that those images didn't match reality. What mattered was that gatekeepers wanted to keep him in a box. But boxes don't hold when the tape tells the truth. And eventually, Shedeur's play made that narrative feel less like analysis and more like what it really was: fear of a player who refused to fit the mold. For all the noise, all the narratives, all the hot takes trying to discredit Shedeur Sanders, there's one thing the critics could never erase: the receipts. Because while they were busy nitpicking his Instagram posts or mocking his NIL deals, Shedeur was building a stat sheet that read like a warning label to NFL defenses. The numbers don't flinch. Let's talk production. 40 touchdowns in a single college season. Week after week, dropping bombs on defenses that looked far more overwhelmed by him than he ever looked by pressure. And this wasn't happening behind some elite wall of blockers. His offensive line at Colorado often looked like it was made out of wet paper towels. Yet even when defenses sent blitz packages designed to break him, Shedeur stood tall, took the hits, and kept slinging darts. His completion percentage? Consistently high. Turnovers? Rare, because his decision-making was sharp. Pocket awareness? Veteran-level cool long before he even heard his name called on draft day. Those aren't hype stats. Those are NFL-ready traits revealed in live-action chaos. Clutch DNA stats only tell part of the story. Shedeur also showed something that can't be measured on paper: the ability to deliver when it matters most. Late in games, when defenses pinned their ears back, when his jersey was grass-stained and his linemen were gassed, he got better. He didn't flinch. Game-winning drives, surgical throws on 3rd and long, commanding sideline presence that made it clear his teammates trusted him no matter the scoreboard. That's not social media hype. That's leadership and ice in his veins. The tape was the truth. It's wild to think about how often the experts ignored the actual tape. Because if you watched the film, what did you see? Script, fast progressions through reads, anticipation throws that fit into windows defenders didn't even know were open, pocket movement that looked more polished than quarterbacks already starting Sundays. If a nameless prospect with those exact traits showed up at a mid-major school, scouts would have labeled him a hidden gem. But because it was Shedeur Sanders, proud, confident, already a brand, they called it hype, receipts, rumors. This is the part the critics can't walk back. The receipts were there the entire time. The numbers were there. The resilience was there. The tape was screaming the truth. Shedeur wasn't developing into an NFL quarterback. He already was one in progress. So when the same doubters who clowned him now act shocked that teams like Cleveland might hand him the keys, don't get it twisted. This was always coming. The only thing that changed is the critics finally had to start reading the receipts they spent years ignoring. If you ever needed proof that NFL punditry can be more about survival than honesty, look no further than the sudden flip on Shedeur Sanders. These are the same talking heads who once rolled their eyes at his highlights, laughed off his swagger, and dismissed his game as Instagram hype. Yet today, some of those voices are out here pitching him as the Browns' best starter option, like they were waving the Shedeur flag from day one. The back pedal is so smooth, it should come with a soundtrack. From dismissal to desperation. First it was, he's not serious enough to lead an NFL locker room. Now it's, Shedeur's poise could bring stability to Cleveland's offense. Before it was, he's not ready for real competition. Now, he might be the future if you give him reps against the AFC North. That's not growth in their analysis. That's desperation PR. A way of cleaning up bad takes once the tide turned. The legacy of bad predictions. It's not the first time either. Remember Lamar Jackson? He was ripped apart for being just a runner. Now, he's got an MVP on his shelf. Jalen Hurts, drafted to be a backup plan, written off as not accurate enough, then led his team to a Super Bowl in under 3 years. When analysts get it wrong, they don't apologize, they rebrand. They edit their own history until it looks like they never doubted in the first place. And Shedeur's case fits the exact same pattern. The Browns angle. What makes this flip even funnier is that it's happening in Cleveland. This isn't a franchise known for quarterback stability. It's a carousel. A comedy reel of jersey names scratched out and replaced year after year. So when even the doubters know the Browns need a spark badly enough to maybe hand Shedeur the keys, you realize how far the narrative has twisted. They're no longer clowning him. They're quietly handing him the weight of the franchise. The truth behind the pivot? Here's the reality. Shedeur didn't suddenly become better. He didn't magically evolve from cocky kid to NFL leader in one off-season. He was always this, always composed, always polished, always ready for the spotlight. What changed is that the critics had no choice but to pivot. The receipts they ignored became too obvious to conceal. The film, the poise, the leadership, it left them exposed, so they flipped the script. And now, the same people who mocked his chains and Instagram posts are pretending they discovered his ability first. Because in the NFL, hypocrisy isn't a bug, it's a feature. And Shedeur Sanders just forced an entire section of the media into the cleanest 180 the league has seen since Lamar can't throw. If there's one NFL franchise where Shedeur Sanders actually makes perfect sense, it's the Cleveland Browns. And that's not even an insult. Okay, maybe it's a little bit of an insult, but hear me out. Cleveland has tried everything at quarterback. First rounders, retreads, big-name contracts, surprise veterans magically yanked off the couch. And every attempt seems to end the same way: disappointment. The infamous fan jersey with nearly 30 scratched-off names is basically a historical document at this point. It's not just about finding a quarterback anymore. It's about finding someone who can survive the circus and spin it into something people actually want to watch. And that's why Shedeur fits. Joe, Cleveland needs more than good. The Browns already have a defense that can win games. They've got Myles Garrett wrecking backfields, playmakers on both sides of the ball, and a fan base that lives and dies with Sunday results. What they don't have? A face. Deshaun Watson was supposed to be that face, but injuries, inconsistency, and everything tied to his contract turned him into an anchor more than a savior. Joe Flacco's story was cute, but even Browns loyalists know that's not the future. Dylan Gabriel? A rookie with potential, sure, but he doesn't sell jerseys or spark headlines. Shedeur Sanders, though, he checks both boxes, talent and brand. He's accurate, composed, and unshakably confident. But he also brings eyes, discussion, clicks. And in a league where entertainment value is almost as important as performance, that matters more than the front office will admit. Whoa, the Cleveland chaos factor. Then there's the X factor, chaos. If any team is wild enough to roll the dice on a rookie with swagger this big, it's Cleveland. They've gambled on Manziel. They've burned money on Watson. They've drafted projects and washed up vets and pitched them as solutions. So tell me, Why not gamble this time on someone who actually looks competent? For a franchise always searching for the next unexpected storyline, Shedeur fits like a glove. He's disruptive in the right ways, a leader, a presence, a brand. His arrival doesn't just grab attention. It wrestles it away from the Browns' endless negativity and places it on possibility. Why it works? The Browns need more than consistency. They need inspiration. They need somebody fearless enough to walk into one of the NFL's toughest divisions and act like he belongs there from day one. Shedeur has been groomed for this spotlight since childhood, built for the criticism, hardened by pressure. And whether you love him or not, he brings something Cleveland hasn't seen in decades: true upside. That's why Cleveland makes sense. Not because it's safe, but because Shedeur, chaos-tested, brand-made, and unbothered, is the one risk that might not backfire. Here's the part a lot of old-school analysts still don't get. In today's NFL, quarterbacking isn't just about throwing touchdowns. It's about being the franchise. And that means Shedeur Sanders brings something most rookies can't even fake. He's not just a quarterback, he's a CEO in cleats. The businessman in the locker room. While most rookies show up to camp just trying to memorize the playbook, Shedeur has already been running his own brand for years. NIL deals at Colorado weren't just money grabs. They were practice reps for the real game, controlling the narrative. He knows how to pitch himself, how to protect his image, and how to turn scrutiny into spotlight. Whether it's custom suits on game day or a well-timed post on social media, nothing is accidental. That polish is rare, and the NFL knows it. Sponsors know it. Even Cleveland's front office, whether they'll admit it or not, knows it. Pressure tested since day one. Remember, this is a kid who grew up under Deion Primetime Sanders' glare. Since birth, Shedeur has lived under brighter lights than most NFL starters ever will. Every good play comes with over-the-top hype. Every slip gets magnified into a headline. But instead of cracking under it, he's adapted. Cool under fire, composed in chaos, comfortable as both a player and a persona. He knows how to handle pressure, not just from an edge rusher, but from entire media cycles trying to bury him. That kind of presence is worth gold to a franchise, especially one like Cleveland, desperate for stability and star power at once. The franchise face effect. Here's the thing. The Browns don't just need someone who can complete passes. They need someone who can sell jerseys, fill stadiums, and convince fans that the future is worth buying into. Shedeur already leads rookie jersey sales. He's trending on social platforms without even starting a regular season NFL game yet. And when a player controls attention like that, they elevate the whole franchise. Local businesses, national sponsorships, media coverage. The spotlight follows him everywhere. That's not a distraction. That's value. Why it matters? The Browns' biggest challenge isn't just winning games. It's rewriting their identity, shaking off decades of dysfunction. That takes more than a quarterback. That takes someone who embodies leadership on and off the field, and Shedeur has already proven he's that package. Quarterback, leader, brand, organizer, polished enough to rally a locker room, marketable enough to excite a fan base, and composed enough to thrive under the NFL's microscope. No, he's not just playing for the Browns. He's building a business, a culture, and a narrative. And Cleveland might finally be smart enough to realize that's exactly what they've been missing. Let's cut through the noise. The criticism around Shedeur Sanders was never really about his talent. It wasn't about mechanics, accuracy, or even his ability to read defenses. The real story is that Shedeur represented a version of quarterback that broke every rule, the threat to the old mold. For decades, NFL insiders loved one type of rookie QB, the yes sir, no sir prospect who smiled politely, kept his head down, and blended into the system. Shedeur never fit that mold. Instead, he showed up with swagger, with chains, cars, and Instagram captions that doubled as headlines. Old school voices spun that into immaturity. But the truth? That was Shedeur building his own system. He wasn't playing their game. He was turning the spotlight into part of his skill set, and that terrified traditionalists. Because if Shedeur succeeds, it proves their old filters for real quarterbacks don't work anymore. Not just a player, but a disruptor. The reason the media bent over backward to downplay his stats wasn't because the numbers lied. It was because the numbers threatened to expose their bias. How do you keep saying he's not NFL caliber when he's out there putting up 40 touchdowns? How do you call him all hype when teammates describe him as calm, precise, and composed in the huddle? You don't, unless you move the goalposts. And that's exactly what happened. Critics decided he was distracting or too market-polished because admitting the obvious, that he was elite, meant admitting they were wrong. The future they tried to deny. The real story isn't that Shedeur wasn't ready. It's that he was too ready, too composed, too different. He embodied a future version of quarterback. One part field general, one part CEO. And that future made the old guard uncomfortable. But the game doesn't wait for comfort. Now those same critics are pivoting, backpedaling, pretending they always saw the upside. But everyone remembers how it started. The internet never forgets who mocked and who believed. Because here's the truth, Shedeur Sanders isn't just fighting for Cleveland's QB1 spot. He's fighting for a new definition of quarterback. One where control of brand, leadership off the field, and ice-cold poise on it aren't contradictions. They're the blueprint. And whether the gatekeepers like it or not, that blueprint is winning. So here we are, the same critics who once scoffed at Shedeur Sanders, who called him a flashy social media quarterback, are now the ones whispering that he might actually be Cleveland's best option to start. The irony writes itself. One moment, he was dismissed as too cocky, too distracted, or just Dion's kid riding a name. The next moment, those very same voices are carefully editing their takes, trimming the rough drafts of their arrogance, and packaging them as insight now that his talent is undeniable. It's the pivot we've seen before. Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, even Patrick Mahomes was once doubted before rewriting the rulebook. The pattern is the same. The so-called gatekeepers mock, minimize, and nitpick until it becomes impossible to hide the truth. And when the truth finally gets too loud, they flip the script and pretend they saw it coming all along. But here's the difference with Shedeur. He was ready for this moment, built for the noise. Pressure doesn't break Shedeur. He bends it back on itself. Every cheap shot about jewelry became motivation to sharpen his reads. Every headline calling him all brand, no ball became ammo to keep working. He didn't waste time clapping back. He let his arm, his poise, and his consistency do the talking. And now, the critics are running laps trying to keep up. Why Cleveland fits the story. The Cleveland Browns may not be the fairy tale landing spot, but in a strange way, it's poetic. This is a franchise starving for a quarterback who can not only play, but command a narrative. They've tried almost everything. First rounders, veterans on their last legs, endless rotations, and now find themselves with Shedeur Sanders, a rookie who is both chaos-tested and spotlight-ready. The Browns need more than competency. They need relevance, and Shedeur provides both. The receipt era. The best part? This time, the internet has receipts. Every old quip, every dismissive soundbite, every critic who laughed at Shedeur is archived forever. So when they cheer his first NFL wins, when they line up to crown him as Cleveland's star, fans will remember the backpedals. And Shedeur will too. Closing punch. This was never about sudden growth. This was never about a magical leap from not ready to QB1. Shedeur Sanders has always been this guy. Always polished, always composed, always the blueprint. The only ones late to the party were the gatekeepers too stubborn to admit they were wrong. Now, they're believers. But they're not leading the parade. They're trailing behind, receipts stapled to their backs, while Shedeur walks forward, head high, owning a spotlight he was always built for. And the Browns, they just might find out that the quarterback the league laughed at is the very one who finally makes them relevant again.